Super League spotlight shining so bright. Interviews and news, come join the hype.
Happy New Year and welcome to Super League Spotlight. Rona, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I know. When do you think the cut-off is for Happy New Year's?
I think we're good. We're only a week in, aren't we? I mean, that's
Oh no, I'm not slating you, but I just mean like, because sometimes you don't see people for a while. And
yeah.
you're
No,
like,
I think when you're in January, everyone hates January, so you can kind
okay.
of get away with it by saying like, "Oh well, Happy New Year. Let's keep our spirits up."
I like that energy. You bring that.
Yeah. Did you have a nice Christmas? Nice New Year?
It was very, very busy. But it was good. What about yourself?
Christmas was good, busy as always. But no, lovely, lovely time. Obviously, being a teacher, it's nice to have a couple of weeks off work to celebrate. I know everyone doesn't get that, so don't hate me. But no, it was nice. I missed basketball a bit though. Like we
Dramatic pause.
dramatic pause.
I
No,
think it's nice to have downtime from it. So I imagine the players were the same, from seeing some stuff online, to go home sometimes and recharge or get away. I think it's mentally switch off, not so much even physically, but just for them to have some downtime, I think will have been nice.
yeah, and then some of them went home across to America again, and I think yeah, recharged the batteries for a busy second half of the season.
Indeed. Although you say second half, however, no team is actually halfway through.
No, I
Three
think
months
what
in,
7 games or something.
4 months to go, and to fit in, is it like 13, 14 games on average after 3 months and 7 games?
Well, speaking of that, Durham have got a double header this next week going coming, but we'll come on to that. The lesser seen double header in the SLBW.
Sounds good.
But right, let's go back in time and before Christmas because we had a weekend of games just before Christmas that we didn't get a chance to cover. But we had the top of the table clash, Sheffield and
Mhm.
Oakland's, and Oakland's have taken advantage in the race for the title.
They have stayed unbeaten. That's what they do. Both teams would have been gunning for that to go into that Christmas break, knowing they're on top and taking that advantage. And it'd make both teams have to stay firing all cylinders. But I think Oakland shot five less shots, but they were 11% better shooting percentage. And I think that's pretty much what it's come down to, hasn't it? Although I also thought it was quite interesting. They both had the same number of turnovers, but Oakland's had the 22 bench points to Sheffield's 10.
Hmm.
And that's quite a swing when you think about tired legs and that shooting percentage potentially. Just being a little bit fresher towards the end of the game.
Yeah, I think for Oakland's, the fact that no one scored more than 14 shows how
Mhm.
kind of team performance it was for them.
Yes.
But yeah, Georgia Gale did her best for Sheffield, 27 7,
Mm.
sorry, 6 and 5. That's 27 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, right?
Well, yeah, we'll come on to that, won't we?
But yeah, Auckland's kind of in pole position now. Everyone's talking about how good they are.
Yeah, they seem to be gelling. It seems to be working. Um, Coach Lee Ryan's done a really good job. They've got a lot of good players there, and having to rotate through, keep players happy, keep court time ticking for all of them, keep them all performing. So I doff my imaginary cap.
So, right, Auckland's ended the year unbeaten. Let's move on to the huge win for Manchester.
Hmm.
106-50 against Durham. Turned out to be a little bit of a quarter final for the Cup. Manchester getting the last spot in the Cup semi-finals. And the first ever quadruple double in league history, including WBL in that as well. Davida Dale.
Hmm. She went off, didn't she?
It
And
is.
really nice consistent numbers. 12, 13, 14, 10. Just that it was just doing it all. And it wasn't like taking over in one area. But I also thought it was wild that, I mean, the quadruple double first in history, but also Danny Williams poured in 32 and 13 with a 43 index. I
Yeah.
mean, what Dale achieves amazing at 38 index. And you're like, wow, they were some big numbers. But a 56-point win, you'd be expecting some of your key players, unless you were resting them, to be putting up those big numbers. But yeah, awesome for them. And Manchester, no Fitzpatrick, no EJ. So, they've still got levels as well.
Yeah. Do you know what? Like, I went down to Manchester for this. And first quarter was quite tight. It was back and forward. It was scoreline was close, and then Manchester that second quarter, and actually the fourth quarter, like particular, but there was just like electric scoring was just so consistent.
They
Uh,
found their groove and they just ran with it.
yeah, absolutely. For Durham, it was nice to see Sarah Wells back in action.
I did note that. That was good.
So 14 minutes, and obviously in a couple of weeks break now before the weekend's game against Caledonia, possibly getting her back to somewhere near full fitness. Um, I was a little bit confused about Harriet Otwell Soulsby on that game. She seemed to get into a lot of really good shooting positions and then didn't take the shot. Um, so I'm not sure if that was a team kind of instruction or but she just did
Confidence?
not want to take the shot.
Was that a confidence thing sometimes?
Quite possibly, absolutely quite possibly. Um there's just one thing I noticed at the time. I just thought
Yeah.
and Harry Ottlesworthy of last season probably takes those shots. But yeah, huge win for Manchester because they've been a little bit inconsistent, obviously change of head coach as well, but that really was impressive. Right, moving on. Chloe Gaynor can't stop winning. I mean, we had this one down, didn't we? Cardiff against Newcastle. We had
Yeah.
this down as a Newcastle win. 80 points to 45. Newcastle again booking their spot in the semi-final of the cup. But yeah, Newcastle won again.
Yeah, and they won again. They won all their quarters. Tara Hodges boringly put in 19 and 14. You know, she's averaging 22 and 9, so she right upped her rebounds on that game. Kendall Currents had a great game. She went 21 and 5. Cardiff, I think the killer was 32 turnovers. And they were three from, although both teams, their 3-point shooting was not with them on that day because Cardiff went 3 from 15 at 20%, which looks highly efficient compared to the 2 from 12 and
Mm,
11% of Newcastle. But Newcastle, that isn't really their game. You know, the 3-point shot, they are mostly getting the ball inside, driving, and getting themselves to the line. Although Cardiff 100% from the free throw line. It was just unfortunate they only had 8 free throws, but
didn't
that's
get
good.
there with them.
Yeah, it just didn't get there enough, but you know, they converted them when they had to. Again, Cardiff's still sitting under that 50 mark.
Yeah.
It would be really good to see them start to break through that consistently.
Yeah, we've mentioned that a lot, haven't we? That 50-point barrier for
Uh-huh.
Cardiff. They get close, they get up to 45,
Uh-huh.
49. Um,
And they've taken a win with it, you know,
yeah,
so
yeah.
it can be effective. It's just then defensively stepping up.
Okay, moving on then. Essex against London, another one that we had down for an Essex home win, 82 points to 58. Some big numbers in there again for Essex. Thoughts on London not getting a win yet? Thoughts on Essex? A bit inconsistent as well themselves this season.
Yeah, Essex are up and down, and we talked about it before, and I mentioned it on comms at the weekend when we get onto the Gladiators game. It very much depends how Taylor's getting on, I think, and what sort of game she's having. She did actually have quite a quiet London game. You know, she only went 9, 8, and 7. Maria really stepped up 22 and 5. I feel London, they've now got a head coach in, and the fact they've announced the head coach, I'm like, has it just been quite unstable there insofar as it was just someone trying to steady the ship? So I think that's a positive step that they've brought in somebody of a good caliber that hopefully like they're going to get the majority of the season with the team, really, in effect, when it comes down to games played. Um so yeah, I think it was a good solid win for Essex to take that. And they'll have been pleased going into the break with that one against London, but it was also unexpected. Maisie Spinks, interestingly, didn't score. I think she was 0 from 8 on the 2-point land, but went 4 from 8, so 50% from 3-point land. I mean,
I
you'll
always
take
love that
that,
kind of
right?
stuff.
Yeah, but isn't it funny where it's like she must probably was like, how on earth am I nailing these, but I can't go 2 steps closer and miss it? You know, it's interesting.
Right, the last game just before Christmas was your very own Caledonia Gladiators against the Leicester Riders. What happened?
They lost. Riders won.
58-80.
I will hold my hands up and say I didn't see that coming.
Hmm.
And I also didn't see it in as convincing a manner coming. I just thought, having been there doing the commentary live, Raiders were just all over it. They were hungry, they were up for it. You know that when you just get the vibe that a team's got steam coming out their ears and they are just going to bust their backsides and whatever they do. And what I really liked from Raiders was Kaya Harrison, obviously, awesome first half. They'd managed to sort of nullify her in the second half, but then you had Jessica Eats for Jade step up, you had Julia Chandler step up, you had Shara Bood coming off the bench stepping up. They all just found a way to make it work, and they did what they needed to do to get the win, and they played at times some nice basketball. They got their 50% from 3-point land. Yeah, Gladiators, they only had 5 free throws the entire game. I felt like they were sitting quite outside it a lot. That was 3 points, whereas when the ball was going inside, they were often getting something of it. But that fourth quarter, 22-10, was just like probably the worst way to go into a Christmas break. For me as a player, that would be, yeah, I would just be like, oh, what just happened there? And it was a bit like that. Riders came up, punched them in the face,
Yeah.
left.
Like both Caledonia and Leicester have been very up and down this season. Something like Leicester went, yeah, both teams have just lost games.
Leicester lost to Cardiff.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah, yeah.
you just like make it make sense.
Hmm. No, speaking from Caledonia's point of view, obviously they got a tough draw in Europe, but they didn't get a win in that. They've had what is it, 5-5 or 4-4 for this season, wins and losses.
After the weekend, yep, four and
What do you
four.
feel? What do you feel their season's been so far? Do you think they'd be happy, or do you think there's lots of things to work on?
I would say, well, who's going to be happy sitting mid-table 4 and 4? Although they are through to a final, and they did beat a current unbeaten team at that point in Sheffield.
Hmm.
I think they were looking good in pre-season. I don't know if it's the combined travel and all that sort of thing that's come home and hit them. But some of the players, that's not their first season doing that. Um, I think Delaney Byrne is really coming into herself. She had a really good game this weekend. I don't think they'll be happy with it at all. Because the players and the coaching staff and the backroom staff will have far higher expectations
Hmm.
for where they want to be, hence them being in Europe. And although they didn't take a European win, they
Yeah,
were pushing at times and
they
knocking
were
on
they
the
were
door.
close in quite a few of those games,
Yeah,
weren't
but
they?
then you would argue it's hard, isn't it? Because you're like, is it at detriment to pushing for the league? But then you hear the other teams, like you've heard Manchester and stuff, say like we want to push um for European competition and that. So other teams will come on board. London managed it fine, but obviously astronomical budget. I'm assuming because you don't know these things in comparison. So yeah, I don't think they'll be content going, do you know what? We're doing well. They were a second place team to the unbeaten Euro Cup winners last year. So I think they'll want and expect more, which is I think more what we saw in the game. But it's about them backing it up in consistent games. Going and the same for the Riders as well, showing why they've always been in and amongst the talk of that top five.
Mm. I think if travel is one thing, obviously looking towards the next 4 months, they're going to have less of that,
Mm-hmm.
so that might have an impact in some of the matches coming up. But let's move on then. That was before Christmas, and then we had all holidays and all sorts, and lots of cheese and celebrations, and then Sheffield came and bounced back with a win in Newcastle on Saturday night. A big convincing win, really.
Yeah, I think Eagles can always be a tricky team to play. And they've shown that with their wins and consistency. And I think Sheffield needed that. It's funny watching how teams will respond. And Grant and I were talking about that, is the break a good thing or a bad thing? When you've just had a loss, how are you going to bounce back, or do you just forget about it because it was X amount of weeks ago? If this was week to week gameplay, the game 2-3 weeks ago is not going to matter.
Mhm.
Um, so I think it's how you're going to come out the gates and making sure you show coach that you have not fully taken your foot off the gas when you have been released for a week or 10 days or whatever it is you get.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Well, the last two games I've been to over the last couple of years against Sheffield and Newcastle, Newcastle have won those. So Sheffield
Mhm.
have struggled when they've come up to
Mhm.
Newcastle in the last couple of seasons. Um, so yeah, good win for them. First loss for Chloe Gaynor though.
I know. It's always going to have to happen at some point, wasn't it? But and it's interesting. She does seem to just now be staying in that head coach role, doesn't she?
Yeah.
And not so much that player. And I think fair play, do what needs to work for you, and for your team. And if that means you coaching for the 40 minutes without, I think player coach must be a rough old job. I think you have to have a very good compartmentalized brain where you can be on the court as a player with your teammates, but then you can speak to them without the same emotion of the on court to be their coach.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
I don't have that. I just
They're very
don't.
different rules, aren't they? Teammates.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And
Yeah.
not letting someone missing their pass or turning the ball over to use a player impact and use how you're going to coach them. Or just keeping your pals on.
Yeah, fair.
Like, because you're like, I really like them. Like, I know they'll come good, but you can't do that. So yeah, I think do what works. Yeah.
Let's move on then. Caledonia, Essex. Caledonia bounced back after their disappointment against Leicester, 93-71. You don't often see Caledonia scoring that amount of points as well, so that's a big bonus for them.
It is, and I think for them as well, it was the game they needed to sort of shake off what had happened with the Riders and when they'd been held to 58. They had 34 in the opening quarter, which just kind of blew it out the water a little. They played some really nice defensive stuff in the end of the first, and I'd like to have seen more of it. They just had I was like 4 turnovers in a row or something they forced them into.
Mhm.
Rebels had a bit of a struggle at the office that day anyway, just with how their shots weren't dropping and various other bits like that. But the Rebels still took the second and fourth quarter, albeit by one. But when the Gladiators still have to travel back to Essex, that'll fill them with confidence, like we can keep pace with these guys and hopefully flip that score around.
Yeah, you mentioned Delaney Byrne earlier. She really has over the past month or so
Uh,
really kind of upped her scoring rates, up kind of her impact in the team.
Yeah, and they play her in that really sort of coming high position, whether it's on the pick and roll or whatever. And she was going into the weekend, she was shooting twice as many threes as she was twos. And she did have a few big threes at the weekend, but she does such nice work on the inside as well. We saw that with Sammy Roscoe last season. It's that sort of swing, what you would call it a swing position, but it's like a swing five or popping out. But it's working, and I guess when it's working, it's great. And Hannah Robb obviously pouring in
Yeah.
15, 9 and 3. Just another solid performance from her. We saw her coming off the bench a bit, but she seems to be back in the starting lineup. Yeah, Tia Adams got a bit more court time. I like how Tia plays.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah, Hannah Robb making the team of the week as well with her performance.
And that's going to help with going into the GB window. I assume several, her, Kirsty, will be involved. And obviously, Tia will be going off to represent Estonia, which will be coming then back to play. She'll probably have to fly out to Estonia to fly back to Manchester.
Yeah.
But that'll be interesting to see them match up. There's a good podcast getting on one of the British representing gladiators and the Estonian representing gladiator and have a wee, what's the word, international break.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
always up for that. Yeah, absolutely. Right, one game left that last weekend, but we couldn't watch it. Oh no.
Oh, and I mean that did not fuss me in the slightest.
Do you want me just to leave you to it or?
I mean, I think about it, when I'm driving, and then I can get my knickers in such a knot thinking about it. And I get the streams don't bring in money for clubs. They're not. It's not necessarily where you're going to generate a massive fan base, but I'm like, if you want sponsors and stuff to come in, and this isn't just on one club because it's happened at multiple places. So I'm like, there needs to be more support in place to help clubs because they don't have the same backing as the men. They don't have a deal with the zone. That's not there. So I just think there needs to be more help and support in place to help the stream be out there. Because if you're a sponsor coming in, you're not going to go, oh, I'm going to start something brand new with this and I'm going to pay for all this tech and comms and blah, blah, blah. You're going to be like, oh, there's already something there, like a plug and play. cool, we'll come on board with that, but we can also bring in, I don't know, lighting or make sure it goes out every week on YouTube, upgrade whatever needs upgraded. Um, they always say you can't be what you can't see. And not everyone can get to all these games, especially in the teams where it's not that sort of central belt. So people do want to watch. You do. I saw there was 7 people watching our stream at the weekend. 7. And probably 2 of them, one was my husband and one was my in-laws, but that's fine. But I think it's got to be out there and be out there consistently, because that's how you get people along. It's a bit like if you run an after school club, but it's on one week on a Tuesday, it's on the next week on a Thursday, and then both the school clubs are on the Thursday, but then the next 3 weeks they're off and then they're back on a Friday. There needs to be a sort of consistency going. And then I was also thinking about the Scottish national team, even when it wasn't going great and whatever, people still went along or what, and there was still a form of support. And then when they started doing really well, the seats are filled, they're selling out. So it's got to ebb and flow. And I think that's where the league's got to do as much as possible to get the clubs all to a standard doing that, so that you can attract more people, and people want things easily as well sometimes, sponsors, etc. If they're looking at various sports, are you going to go with something that needs a lot of work and a lot of help? Or are you going to go with something that's more of a product already?
Yeah, no, when we talked to Emily Clark, she said one of her kind of roles was to work alongside and give support and see what teams are doing at the moment and how they can kind of improve their product and improve their streams and improve
Mm-hmm.
across. So hopefully there will be support there for teams. I know this is not a Nottingham thing, as you said. It's happened kind of league wide over the past whatever years, but in this season as well.
Yeah, and I also think if it was happening in the men's game, would it just be all right? Another thing is, and it won't be this, I am sure it's not a league thing, it's happened to the men's as well, but the live stats, I don't know what's going on with that. So, like, a couple of
Yeah, I know
games
what you
when I
mean.
was going back to look at them, they weren't working, or sometimes there's no stream and the live stats aren't working. And you're like, and we're 2 people who are very invested in basketball, so we plug away, but would I bother doing that for something I wasn't as interested? I'd have chucked it. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I think there needs to be ownership and trying to push that forward. Maybe there is, and we just don't know, but that's the thing. It's lovely to be ignorant to probably the 40 million cogs and wheels behind the scene.
Yeah, but Auckland's got the win, remaining unbeaten, but it wasn't probably as convincing as we would have thought. Obviously, without watching the game, it's hard to kind of know exactly what the game is. But not Auckland's won the first quarter by 20,
Yeah,
and the rest of the game, Nottingham won the second, third, and fourth quarter game 61-57. Um,
yeah, yeah.
so we wouldn't have
It's
we
so
wouldn't have
true.
thought that like, going into that game.
No, game of 2 halves, wasn't it? Like you say, Nottingham win the fourth by 5, they drew the third, and they lost the second by 1.
Mhm.
So I'm sure you'd have been like, oh, Karen Burton, like, can we just, scrap that first one and go from
Yeah.
there? But and that's why sometimes you wish you could see it, because you can look at stats till the cows come home, but you need a feel for the game. What is it like? A bit like you talking about Harriet. I didn't manage really to catch much of the game, but that'd be interesting. I'd be like, well, actually, they could have probably scored more, but you don't see that from a stat sheet.
Hmm.
Because you don't see player thought about attempted shot or player gave up a good passing opportunity. I mean, I'm sure in the future with AI and all that, we will get things like that.
Live
But
stats will be a mile long.
yeah, for me, one of the big things was Nottingham only having the 4 bench points. Claire Jacobs obviously still putting in solid numbers, 31 and 7, but I think, yeah, that's still quite a tight rotation and stuff there.
Yeah. So moving on though, Nottingham travel to the northeast to take on the Eagles, which is as we've just said, Eagles are always a tough team to take on. But
Yep,
let's move on to looking at the weekend ahead.
yep.
That's one of the games we've got our local derby, Durham against Caledonia.
So it's basically me and you.
Yeah.
Who's going to
We need to have
fall
some
down
sort of
first?
wager on this one.
Yeah.
What do you think about
Loser.
that matchup then?
I know you'll back Durham, so I'll back Gladiators to go and get the win. And also, Gladiators are looking to build and get as much momentum going into their final. So I think it's going to be sticking with the rotation, what's working, and trying to push that out.
No, it can work the other way though. They'll be thinking about the final. They won't want to kind of overdo themselves. Ah,
Fair
I think
enough.
just have a rep, make sure they don't outdo themselves this weekend.
Nah, this is when you put in the hard yards to prove why you get your court time in the
Why you get the
final.
starting spot in the final.
Yep,
Again, interesting to see how many Durham have available. That's
yep.
always a question mark. We talked about it before the Manchester game, and again they went with, barring that 14 minutes from Sarah Wells, they went with the kind of the five that played the whole match the weekend before.
Uh-huh.
So it's a huge consideration when you look at Durham's fixtures. But no, I'll back them. I'll back Durham.
Good. Even though you're wearing your Rebels top.
Well, yeah, I say you've got to just mix it up every now and again, right? Cardiff and Essex then are another matchup at the weekend. I'm guessing we're both going to go with Essex.
Yes. But I like you say, Essex can be so hit and miss as well. But I think the firepower they've got in the backcourt will be enough to see them through.
Yeah. And possibly the game of the weekend, Auckland's against Manchester. Now, Manchester
Mhm.
finding a bit of form before Christmas. Auckland's remaining unbeaten. Manchester travel to Auckland on Saturday.
I think if it was a Manchester home game, I'd be posturing differently. I think just Oaklands are feeling it at the moment.
Yeah.
I think things are working, they're clicking. I think if Manchester got a win, that could really flip things around because that would really boost them and push them on. Auckland's could bounce back still fine from it, but
Yeah.
I think that could be if Manchester took the win, I think that would be massively important for them. It could make Auckland's more dangerous as well though,
Mm,
because we see teams when they're losing, they tend to bounce back hard the next time. Because you do learn more from losing, and it does leave you with a chip on your shoulder.
yeah.
Um, yeah, no wonder I've got like so many chips on my shoulder. But that just is what happens. The player fires you up because you're like, cool, I don't want to feel like that again. So let's not.
Yeah, I think I'm the same as you. I think Auckland's will get the win, but be good for the league though, I think, as a competition with Manchester, just to mix it up a bit.
Yeah,
Be good. Eagles against Nottingham finishing off Saturday's games. Um, I'll kick off and say an Eagles win.
I think so. I think Nottingham will push them hard. I just think you'll have someone like Tierra Hodges who'll be able to take over the game.
Yeah.
If Kendall Currents finds their form again, I think they'll be okay. I do think though Claire Jacobs could do a lot of work on them on the inside. So if she gets going and gets going early, that could be challenging. So I think sometimes they can struggle in that
Mm,
position. Especially if you've got someone else being able to sort of just match up and make Hodges' life difficult. You can't be expecting her to do that and play
yeah.
35 plus minutes.
Right, Sunday, the two games, Sheffield, London. I think we know how that's going to end.
Going Sheffield, but hopefully start to see improvements with London.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not overly au fait with the rules, but are London able to still bring in some players? I would be surprised if with like a head coach, a new head coach in place, if they wouldn't do that. So it might be interesting to see what comes out. But I
Okay.
would like to and hope to see some improvements as well.
And as I mentioned before, Durham playing twice this weekend, and when you've got a short roster, that's always a bit tough.
It is, but if you don't let the lactic acid settle in, it can't really be a problem.
But they're travelling to Leicester on Sunday.
Yeah, I think that's quite compounding factors. But if they're taking a bus, at least there'll be plenty of seats
Yeah.
to stretch out over. But I think that'll be tough. But also, they're athletes. This won't be the first time they've ever played two games in a row. Yes,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
getting older, but they're still babies in the grand scheme of the world. Women hit their peak, what, 28 to 30. So they'll be able to go out, they'll be able to do it. A lot of them been through the American college system, etc.
Is
They'll
that the
get.
headline? Rona says Durham team getting older. Wow.
No, I never said that. I did say exactly that actually. So
Exactly
I
that.
don't think I put a team name to it.
Vote.
No, I said they're getting more experienced.
Right, right, okay. If that lets you sleep at night, that's fine.
I know. No wonder nobody will look me in the eye when I see them at games.
Oh, there's Rona.
I know.
I
God, us
mean,
old.
so last weekend we saw, well, not last weekend, but like since we last talked, we saw quadruple doubles, we saw new signings again, Oakland's adding to their roster, we saw new
Yes.
head coaches announced, we saw no streams on games, we saw big wins. Like there's never a dull moment in this league, right?
Yeah, or you could just there's never a bit of consistency. But
Oh, all that.
I think domestic basketball in Britain this year, whether you speak to anyone on the men's side or the women's side or both sides, they're just like, what is going on? And actually, the women's side looks pretty vanilla compared to all the changes and madness on the men's side.
Yeah.
It's good you brought up that signing. Bo Frost down at Oakland's had a solid first outing down there. I wouldn't have thought they'd have been necessarily looking to add their roster, but I mean, she's a cracking young talent. So that's a great pick up for them.
Yeah, so there we have it then, a roundup of the latest action, and we'll look forward to a nice weekend, really, of basketball action as we get into January and everyone gets a bit miserable because the dark nights are still here. We've still got basketball, we're still okay.
And maybe a post-Christmas miracle. Every game streamed, every game's live stats working.
Right, let's get our fingers crossed.
But no, because it is. I care about the game and I want it to grow, and I just feel we need to get these things going.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you for joining us. If you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss anything. We've got some, well, we've just talked about doing an international episode in the window. That will be a good one. We've got our cup final build up coming up in the next couple of weeks as well. So, well, not sorry, not the cup final. The Betty Cardona Trophy final. I'm getting confused with the cup. But yeah, Birmingham's in a couple of weeks, so that's something to look forward to as a league.
It will be. Are you going to the trophy final?
I'm not 100% sure, yes.
Mhm.
It's I mean, are you going? Because obviously you kind of do
Uh, I am going to go. I'm definitely planning to be there.
lovely. Yeah, it should be I think it should be a good game, but yeah, look forward to doing that. So make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss any of that content we've got for you. But yeah, we'll see you on the next one.
See ya.